Greetings, dear listener. I'm here today with the podcast, B is for Bisexual, a new episode, Season 2, Episode 15. It's called Apples and AI. But first, I want to give a shout out to my family in all different places, such as Italy, Maryland, New York State, Alabama, South Carolina, and California. A shout out to all of my relatives because I went to an interesting film festival in Lake Placid recently. It was the Adirondack Film Festival where I showed my aphasia film, and we also read the Zoom hit script part of it. It was part of the Catalyst Stories Institute. And that was fun, and I got to see my sister Claire and her family. So a shout out to them. It was especially great to see Eve and Annabelle, my nieces. Today we're going to be reading Apples and AI. I'm here with my husband Marco Valtorta.
Buongiorno!
And my son Dante.
Hello!
And after we finish the story, I'll tell you a little bit more about my films, which are available on Amazon and Tubi. And now, the short story, Apples and AI. Doo-doo-doo-doo. Without the genius of artificial intelligence, I thought I never could have lived in the same house with Potty. We were two bitches living the golden life. On the morning before I left for the mountains, Potty was stirring the pancake mix and pouring circles of it into the frying pan. The house smelled like butter and bacon. I stretched my toes in bed before dragging myself out and descending the wooden stairs. Potty was moving back and forth along the counter, looking mechanically industrious.
What are you doing here, cooking?
I asked her.
Aren't you spending the weekend with Chadwick?
Yeah, but that's later. Potty had a high, sugary voice to match her squat, generous body. I wanted to give you a proper send-off. Potty was disinvited to the mountains, but she didn't know that. Suresh had said,
"Come by yourself. Don't bring your ghost friend. The two of us need to talk."
Durga will be suspicious.
I told him.
"No, I'll just put her in the closet."
I embraced Potty across the shoulders.
Your preacher friend needs you.
I told her. You gotta love Chadwick, said Potty. He was 6 feet 6 inches tall with beautiful plastic skin. I often forgot he was a robot. I could have put Angelo, the history teacher, into the algorithm, but he was too guapo and too young. After munching down a stack of pancakes, I threw a suitcase and a box of pizzelle cookies into the trunk of my lime green Kia Soul. Potty stood at the front door and looked sad. I wanted it that way. We held each other for a moment. Her hair smelled like bacon. I felt sad about leaving her. The original Potty would not have cared if I left, but the robot was sensitive. I waved out the window of the car and drove off for a week of November mountain air. I was free, except for Suresh. I worked for myself as a lawyer, and I'd set aside 2 weeks for my own private fall break. The second week, Potty and I would be traveling to Charleston for the Gullah Tour and 2 days visiting museums. We'd eat shrimp and dirty rice, or at least I would. I had that to look forward to. The drive to the mountains was through winding roads. Some of the leaves had turned a little bit orange. There was no traffic to curse. I stopped at a Mexican restaurant for lunch. It was a good one in Saluda. None of the other customers stared askance at my ethnic look. I wore my hair big and natural. I wasn't going to hide under a buzz cut or chemical straightener like the original Potty had wanted, and I was determined to eat collard greens, tacos, and mashed potatoes without anybody chastising me. "You're so country," she used to say to me. The road spiraled up, and toward Suresh's house I turned off into Hammond Way, just halfway up the side of the mountain toward Skytop Orchard. It was a big new house with tan brick siding, a stone wall, and a flat rooftop garden. The view projected off into the valley. Suresh and I had dreamed it that way, high up from the rising waters, with plenty of privacy, no country people around, and all the old-fashioned amenities. Suresh had even installed a library and a video viewing room. I climbed out of my green Kia Soul and drank in the view and the silence. The day had turned foggy. Water was dripping off the leaves. I could stand there and watch the valley forever. I didn't really need any people to make me happy, I thought. Just nature, and maybe a good book or a movie on Amazon Prime. Then Durga walked out, wearing a yellow sari, and I was glad to see her. She walked hesitantly, probably looking around for Potty. Suresh burst out of the front door and hurried past her.
You're early. I didn't have time to turn off Durga. Wait a minute. Wait in the car.
He turned and grabbed Durga by the shoulder and spun her around.
That wasn't Carmen. You didn't see anything. Let's go back inside.
Suresh flipped a couple of switches along Durga's spine and wheeled her back toward the house. I got out of the car and grabbed my suitcase from the trunk. Suresh was always going crazy and exaggerating stuff. He made a mess of things on a weekly basis. I wasn't anxious to hear about his latest disaster. Suresh came running out of the house again, his hands flailing.
They want me to get married.
He shouted.
I can't keep my job at the university unless I get married.
Oh, jeez.
So I told them I would marry Durga.
Oh, come on, Suresh. You can't marry a robot.
They don't know she's a robot. They think she's a U.S. citizen, native born.
I stared at my friend. He was exciting, all right, but he needed a closer relationship with the truth.
Did your colleagues not notice when the real Durga died?
Suresh stared at his bare feet.
They're engineers. They never ask about my private life.
I put my arms akimbo.
Well, they sure asked about it when you were dating that grad student Moira. They asked about it a lot.
That was Dean Trivedi. He's a jerk.
Well, I actually agreed with him about Moira. She was too young to realize it was a shit idea to date her advisor.
It was a mistake. My partner, the love of my life, had just died.
I stood staring down at Suresh, who was a skinny guy, much shorter than I was.
You never told them Durga was dead?
They never asked.
Do-do-do-do. After I rolled my suitcase into the guest bedroom, the one overlooking the valley, Suresh and I walked up the steep road to Skytop Orchard. We didn't say much. Suresh was wearing a striped stocking cap, the kind I wore when I was 9, and a Salvation Army t-shirt that read, "I don't care." His hair was greasy, and there was dirt under his fingernails. I felt fine. The sky was cloudy, and the air smelled like apple mash and wet dirt. Leaves crunched under our feet. The line of cars to the orchard was less persistent because it was a Monday. The kids were all in school. Some people had the mistaken idea that picking apples was a game for children. It was therapy, meditation. It was a reminder. We made it up to the Skytop Orchard barn and grabbed a couple of bushel baskets. Then we headed out to the farthest row of apple trees, away from the joy pickers and stragglers.
Why do you need to get married?
I asked him.
I thought you were naturalized about 5 years ago. I was at that ceremony with the old Potty.
I did.
He said.
Doesn't matter anymore. New government crackdown. You have to be born here like Ted Bundy.
What about your robotics grant?
They're afraid I might take it to Mumbai.
You hate Mumbai.
I don't hate Mumbai. I just make more money here.
You know you love it here, not only because of the money, But because I'm here, your colleagues are here. You can make fun of us all.
Dean Trivedi
said Suresh.
is less intelligent than these apple pickers.
He gestured to the men and women climbing the ladders and grabbing the apples like maniacs.
So why does he have the job?
I shrugged.
Tell me a story about Mother Teresa and Idi Amin.
Later.
Said Suresh. He was really having a grump. We filled our baskets with pink lady apples and Macintosh, and then we headed back to the barn to pay. The cost of these apples was ridiculously high, considering that we had picked them ourselves.
I need donuts and cider,
said Suresh. Out there, honey, at the trailer, said the cashier. Sitting at a picnic table, eating our donuts, drinking the hot cider, Suresh brightened up.
I like how you did your hair,
he said.
Thanks. Trying to look like Angela Davis. Did you know she had ancestors who came over on the Mayflower?
Makes sense.
Said Suresh.
To different kinds of ships.
Yeah, she's boss. Did I tell you I want to move to France when I retire?
I like France,
said Suresh.
I could come with you. You're an American citizen. You were born here. Let's get married.
I nearly choked on a donut.
Whoa, cowboy, not so fast. You know I'm gay.
Sure,
said Suresh.
we can fix that.
Being gay is not something that needs to be fixed.
Give me 15 minutes,
said Suresh. I reached over and punched him on the shoulder. He grabbed my hand and massaged it, squeezing the palm and the fingers.
I'll tell you what,
I said.
I'll marry you if you pass the test.
What kind of test?
His voice had grown softer. His eyes were bright and laughing.
Not telling, but you have to take a long, hot shower first.
I can do that,
said Suresh.
And shampoo your hair.
We ate 3 donuts each and then walked downhill to his house. The apples and cider were heavy in our stomachs, but the walk was like falling. When we reached his mini mansion, he took me to the workroom where he constructed the robot companions. His art students and molders designed a plastic body resembling a photograph of whatever features the client requested. The AI people inserted a chip into the head after the client had answered about 500 questions about which personality the client preferred. I had wanted my potty to be like the original potty, but more compliant. Sort of a Stepford wife, but cooler and more intelligent. Better at cooking Indian food. Suresh showed me the robotics table.
This is how we make them move. We use old Roombas.
You should build an Idi Amin robot and a Mother Teresa robot so they can be friends.
No,
said Suresh, moving his head up and down and side to side, as if he couldn't decide between India and the U.S.
I picture them at a resort, like Cancun or Monaco. North Carolina is too rustic.
Too bad.
We can make fun of some other people. I'll tell you a story about them after you take a shower.
That was the second part of the 3-part test I had in mind. Would he tell me a story? It had to be a clever story, and it had to make me laugh. I used his Chimbali machine, all pressure and steam, to make 2 espressi, and then I carried them into the living room and set them on the coffee table with a bowl of Italian olives. Suresh came out of the shower, his hair wet, wearing more Salvation Army clothes, this time a mismatched tracksuit, pink top, black pants.
I hope you didn't break my coffee machine.
No, it worked fine.
That monster cost me $4,000.
We sipped the espresso.
Delicious.
I said.
The coffee machine was worth it. Maybe you should spend more money on clothes.
Why? What's wrong?
He stood up and did a little dance in the tracksuit.
No worries, you're beautiful and pink.
Suresh sat down next to me on the couch, our thighs touching.
Once there was a terrible dean with 2 heads and a tail who ordered a housekeeping robot. He said, untouchable.
Was his name Trivedi?
Oh, no. This terrible dean was called Salman, and he came from New Delhi. This is an imaginary story about the teacher I had in school.
I nodded and put my bare feet up on the coffee table.
This guy, Salman, wanted a servant for his house so he wouldn't have to pay. So I made him a robot, a non-sexy type, and gave it an American brain. The 500 answers I input were based on a client who wanted a smart American wife.
Ha ha.
I said.
Serves him right.
So the robot, called Aubrey, worked in his house for about a year, making the beds and keeping his books. Then she took over his construction company.
What happened to Salman?
He retired, forced out, and moved to Austin.
Wow, I love that story.
Suresh leaned over and kissed me.
Is it a true story?
Yes, Aubrey built this house.
Do-do-do-do! Suresh really nailed part 3. We got into the guest bed after taking off all our clothes. I liked the sight of his body with his clothes off. Small, wiry, no chest hair. He must have read my 500 answers because he knew exactly what to do with my body, which buttons to push, the right spots to press. He gave me a massage. I came nicely before he finished it off with traditional sex. It was altogether a pleasant experience.
I call that the Mother Teresa move,
He said.
missionary position.
Okay.
I said, my eyes closed.
You passed the test.
Do-do-do-do! There was no reason not to marry Suresh. He was my best friend. His Durga was dead. My original Patti lived far away in New Mexico, and she would never find out, or so I thought. I could keep my house. He could keep his house. We planned to meet up on the weekends for more part 3, and he lived in a beautiful house close to an apple orchard. We did the deed on Suresh's rooftop, overlooking the valley, with Durga and Patti as our witnesses. Suresh's neighbor, an elderly lawyer named Roger, who had a notary license, performed the ceremony. He had no idea the witnesses were robots. "Oh, you look lovely, dear," Roger told me. I was wearing a pair of ripped jeans and a black Gudrun Shojin sweater with apples on it.
Thanks. What about him?
I said, indicating Suresh, who had on a too small purple tracksuit from Walmart and bare feet. "Shameful," said Roger, shaking his head. "A man ought to take his first wedding seriously."
What about a second wedding?
"Only if the woman is pregnant." Roger wandered off to get some refreshments. The cake I had purchased from Publix was very good, and Roger cut himself a huge slice. After Roger wandered off to his own house next door, it was easy for us to turn off Durga and turn off Patti and spend the rest of the day in bed. We watched the movie Tootsie on Suresh's giant TV and Tube Light. Terry Garr and Salman Khan were great,
Box office is dead.
I informed Suresh.
The last time I paid money to attend a cinema, the guy who took my money had a gang symbol tattooed to his forehead.
He must have worked in Hollywood,
Said Suresh. We reenacted part 3 a couple of times. Then we went to sleep. Do-do-do-do! I can't say I had much hope for this marriage, nor did I want to project any plans into the future. Suresh's chairman was happy. Once he had produced the marriage certificate, Suresh got tenure and a promotion. When Suresh saw his students return from holiday break, eager for more AI and design work, he asked them to design a better sex robot for him. They spent the spring semester and the summer doing that, following Suresh's instructions and 500 responses. After Suresh and I returned from Paris and New Mexico, which was part of my quest to spy on the original Patti, Suresh replaced me in bed with Dolly Martini, a grotesque singing booby doll with long black hair. I think this had something to do with his mother, who was from Pondicherry and spoke French. I thought Dolly Martini was just a hobby. I did not realize back then that Robot Patti, my servant, was embedded with a communication device. The two Pattis were talking to each other. Robot Patti informed the original Patti what was going on in my life, like marriage to a friend. The original Patti, grumpy as ever, persuaded me to move into her house in New Mexico, where I began to study people living on the Native American reservations and their tribal languages. Some of them looked a lot like Suresh, Indian, skins. Suresh visited me and the two potties every January when the North Carolina mountains became too cold for him. He did not bring Durga or Dolly Martini. We traveled to the reservations in pink and white tracksuits. We studied the irrigation systems there. We enjoyed Georgia O'Keeffe paintings at the Albuquerque Museum. I visited Suresh and his robot lab every Diwali. The best part about those trips to the North Carolina mountains was not Suresh and his colorful tracksuits, or even the excellent sessions of Part 3, but our treks up the mountain for the pleasure of picking apples and drinking hot cider at Skytop Orchard. Then we constructed weird playmates in his lab. Nature and apples help us remember our roots. Do-do-do-do. And that's the end of Apples and AI. Thank you, dear listener, and we hope to see you next month.
Thank you.
Arrivederci.